Hey Gumshoes, welcome to another A Murderous Heart Live. So we're going to take a little different approach from the live Q&A. This might last until Brandon's trial. We'll just see. But with going through the app, I've found new discoveries that I didn't know before. So I thought what might be good would be just, in lieu of the Q&A to just kind of go through some of these discoveries. So there won't really be much like rhyme or rhythm. It'll just be kind of going through like, this is new, or at least this is new to me. Now, also keep in mind, like I've said before, I wasn't able to follow Lori and Chad's trials very closely because I was in school. So there may be some things that when you listen, you might go, oh, well, I knew that, or oh, that's right, yeah. So something that might be new to me may not be new to you. Without further ado, let me share my screen. Okay, as always, if you haven't signed the petition to open an investigation into my brother Joe's death, I would be indebted if you signed it. You can get to it by going to bit.ly/justice for Joe, the number 4. Okay, so now this is, we're going to be veering into the conjecture lane a bit, but there was something that caught my attention uh, in Melanie Gibbs' testimony about a nightmare that David had in the middle of the night on between the 22nd and the 23rd. And after listening to it, I thought, I think we may possibly have an approximate time of death. I'll make that case. Okay, so I'm going to play 3 different videos or clips of videos. One uh, with Melanie being questioned by Lindsay Blake, one with her being questioned by John Pryor, and one from an interview she did with Rexburg Police. I believe that was back in 2021. And then we'll talk about it.
Okay, now I will represent to you that this has previously been admitted as Defense Exhibit 7T, and this is a communication between Lori Vallow and Melanie Gibb. Would you read that first sentence for me?
We sent this to Chad. About 2 o'clock this morning, David woke up with great pain and sorrow in his heart.
And keep going.
He felt something big was going to happen. He saw something with 2 slashes in the side of the mountain, and something about people, and his heart was very heavy, and sharp pain in his stomach and pain in his legs, and he started crying.
Keep going.
He can't remember what was going on or what he saw. It was going to happen now or soon. Please call is when you can. Maybe you can help him understand it. Whatever it was, this is immediate. There was nothing he could do, and it was a horrible feeling. He can't get to these people, and there was nothing he could do for them.
Okay, so I misspoke. One was an investigator. I believe the next one is Melanie Gibb.
Okay, now I will.
What, if anything, happened that night out of the ordinary?
David woke up with just a panic. He had a really bad dream, like a nightmare, and he was very disturbed by it. And I asked him, what was going on, what he experienced, and so I was concerned, and I thought I could call out and see if I could get some help from Lori Chad to see if they could give him a priesthood blessing of comfort.
Judge, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first word. Should give him a what blessing?
Priesthood blessing.
What, if any,
Okay, so you get done with your podcast, everybody goes their separate way, and everybody goes to their bedrooms. And David, I recall David having this dream. He woke up.
Yeah, funky.
Did he come and get you and tell you?
No, I was actually inside him when it happened.
In which room?
In JJ's official room.
Okay, so he woke up and you're this outside of him.
Yeah.
And tell me about what happened from there.
His heart was beating. He was distressed. He said, I just had this really bad dream. And then he kind of sat up and he was just, and he just was, I said, well, tell me about it. And he's like, it was just so dark. He's like, I saw an earthquake and I saw people hurting and I wanted to help them and I couldn't, and something like that. That's what it feels like. Remember, it was like his heart was hurting. Like his whole body was under distress. When he has dreams, they're like lifetime dreams. You know, some people dream vividly. I do not dream like that. He has incredible dreams where he feels everything in his dream. So it affects him at a totally different level.
Okay.
So that's what happened. So then I think, oh my gosh, maybe some evil spirit, because, you know, they were always talking about it. So I text Lori and I text Chad. I'm like, I don't remember what I said. Probably, are you awake or something wrong, Chad. David, I don't remember what I said. I just remember trying to get to them. So I said, I'm going to go get Lori, see if she can help out. The door was locked. And so I was like, I don't know. She's not, I don't know if I should try to wake her up or I just decided just to come back and see David after that.
So you tried the door and
Yeah, the door was locked.
Did you knock on it?
Maybe. I probably did, but there was no answer. I don't remember if I probably did, but and I think I tried calling her too and texting her, and I think I tried calling him. I thought maybe he could help out. Neither one of them responded to me, as you probably could tell in the text. You probably saw that. Nobody responded to me, so I just went back to bed. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So one thing I want to establish is I don't believe any of this. I just don't. One thing you need to understand about David Warwick is that he is way into visions. So I pulled just a few quotes from this document that's out there. I found it on Reddit, and it was from a talk that he did. So I believe someone was taking notes during this talk, and these notes made their way onto the internet. But he talked about how he had his first vision at 14. He had a vision of gangs who were testing him to see if he would take drugs. When he refused if he said if he did take them, he realized he would have to kill the people. So basically they were testing him with drugs, but he realized if he actually took the drugs, like that wasn't on him, he would have to kill the people who gave him the drugs. And some were his friends. He talked about they went through a series of companions. There were new elders in the district who left their garments in a dryer at a laundry mat. And that should be one word. But anyway, by accident, and the owner took them and mocked them with him. And they, quote, dusted off their feet, and the laundromat was burned down that night mysteriously. In another dream, he went to the bad side of town. These notes were written kind of fast. Rocks were raining down on them. He started running, thinking about Samuel, the Lamanite, whoever that is, turned around. 3 black men threw more rocks. Rocks curved around them, got closer, started throwing beer bottles. One stopped in front of the elder's face and fell. And then they declared, "We are the servants of the Lord from the Church of Jesus Christ." The men took off running. He's really big on like thinking that there was just going to be like mass chaos, wars. He was shown government, military, secret combinations, starting with DCDC. And that's the heart of the secret combinations. He saw a 2 a.m. meeting with hundreds present. In California, the people resort to cannibalism. Only live, healthy bodies, not sick or weak ones. In Idaho, he saw thousands in Idaho tied to stakes to be burned alive. He was not spared, but did not suffer. Can feel the flames come up the side of him. He talked about how people were screaming and running. The storm stopped, shaking stopped, looked down the road, could see lights coming from the north. Buses lit up, looked like hope, whatever that looks like. As buses got closer, could see the Obama logo on the bus. Foreign troops pushed out of the buses and were rounding people up. There's a prison camp in Salt Lake City, putting everyone they could catch in there. Played horrible music, so it was hard to pray. And it was vulgar, and people, I guess, were vulgar over the microphone. Then he had a vision of white tent cities. Not sure what that word is supposed to be. South of Freeway, East Side, tent city with Spirit of God. All the way from Fillmore, Beaver, and Cedar City are tent cities. Saints migrating to different camps. Some youth rebelled and wanted to leave. Found 6 of the youth dead the next morning after they left. Everything goes down after the North Korea event, whatever the North Korea event is. In another one, about 20 of them were laying track in a tunnel just west of, I guess, Missouri. 2 wicked men came in and demanded to see the leader. Using the priesthood, both men dropped dead. Mobs and anarchy all over the country, violence city to city, mobs in all directions. They sang hymns 24 hours a day. Heaviness was just too much. These are just excerpts from the document. You can access the document by going to bit.ly, DW for David Warwick, -dreams. So let me now circle back. So putting it all together, and I will go on camera because this could be a little lengthy. So a few things with this. One, we heard in the first video that this dream happened about 2 in the morning. So I wonder if there wasn't ever a dream. This was just, I think they heard what was happening with JJ. Melanie said that she wanted to call out to Chad and Lori. And now that we know that Chad turned off his location tracking, and so had Lori, I do suspect Chad was there that night. I actually suspect Chad and Alex were both there that night, because Melanie was also very nondescript and non-committal about where Alex went after dropping JJ off, and this was in Chad's preliminary trial. Pryor got frustrated with her because he was like, well, what do you mean you don't know if he stayed in the apartment? It wasn't a big apartment. And so I question if we know that Alex's device was back at his apartment, but they also, because Lori and Chad didn't have their location tracking turned on, they could have told him, leave your device at home. But so 1, we have the 2 a.m. detail. 2, we have the detail of Melanie, and it might have just been a slip. It might have been a Freudian slip. It might have been she actually called out for Chad and Lori. She also said she tried calling Chad and calling Lori, texted them. She didn't get a response. But then when she talked to Rexburg police in 2021, there was no preliminary call. She said she just went and tried to walk into Lori's room, but the door was locked. So you put all of that together. First of all, like he's a big boy. You know, like if he had a bad dream and, you know, and there was like some kind of earthquake and he felt helpless, he couldn't help the people who were in trouble and stuff. I mean, like you just deal with it. You have your girlfriend there in bed with you. Why would they feel the need for Melanie to try to open like another adult's bedroom door? Try calling in the middle of the night. Like if Chad had been home, like that could have woken Tammy up. And this is supposedly all because your boyfriend had a bad dream. Like I strongly suspect that, well, I shouldn't say I strongly suspect. I do wonder if JJ was murdered around that time. And if then all of this stuff about, you know, like him feeling so helpless, he couldn't help the victims, you know, there was this sense of immediacy in these dreams, like, you know, and it just sounded like they had to come up with a story for why Melanie was trying to call Chad and Lori in the middle of the night. So what I suspect happened is they heard something going down. Melanie tried to get into Lori's room, couldn't, and then was frantically calling and texting. But, you know, we also found out in Chad's trial that they never pulled Melanie or David's phone records. So, and I've said this before, as I am so grateful for everything Rexburg Police did, everything Fremont Police, Fremont County Sheriff's Office did to get justice. The prosecutors, justice was done. But it does seem like there are a lot of really significant missing puzzle pieces that we most likely will never find out because I suspect even the details that they have in from Lori and Chad's cell phone records will be redacted, or just they won't even be included in the FOIA docs. I strongly suspect they won't. I suspect the FOIA docs out of Idaho, I mean, I could be pleasantly surprised, but I have a feeling these FOIA docs are going to be heavily redacted to protect some of these witnesses. So again, hope not, but yeah. All right. Back to the presentation. Okay, so I also came across some, no, I shouldn't call it evidence, suggestions that, once again, Melanie planned to have her kids killed. And I put this in the time range of August. So first of all, now I've talked about this before, so I won't go into all the details, but I did a live. If one of the other moderators can share the link, otherwise I can share the link in the description if someone reminds me. But I did an entire live about, it was like basically the evolution of Chad's beliefs, and I made the case that I strongly suspect that Lori was the one driving the bus all along. I even shared a video this week. Someone had commented in on one of the videos, and I didn't think much of it at the time. But then when I got back from Arizona, I looked it up because someone had said that Lori had identified as Nephi in Joe's death. And I actually I had ordered a transcription of that recording and it wasn't in there. So then I actually pulled up the video, and the reason it wasn't in there is that she mumbled it, but she clearly said that that she was like Nephi, and then stopped herself. She started to say uh, Laban or Layman, whatever his name was, and like caught herself mid word and stopped. But so I think even the whole Nephi thing came from Lori. I think her whole thing of, you know, I am told I will be like Nephi. I don't think that that came from Chad. I think it came from her. But anyway, so I did this presentation of how I thought that Lori, you know, was driving the bus, and I talked about this big fight that Lori and Chad had, and they actually broke up over it for a hot minute. But and I wondered if this fight was over Lori and Melanie wanting to come to Rexburg. So they wanted, Lori had said in a text message, I'm not sure if yeah. So this was on August 7th. Lori texted Chad and said, I love you, taking Braxy home now. I'll check on, she said on her, she was talking about Brighton, the Boudreaux's middle daughter, one of the kids that was who was identified as being a dark spirit. Then she texted again, she is asleep. She put a bunch of holes in the walls and doors, definitely had demons helping her, probably 1,000. Mel wants us to come up there tomorrow. So this is on August 7th. She's saying Melanie wants them to go up to Rexburg the next day. But I said next Thursday to Sunday. What do you think? And then she followed up, we are both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them. And by the way, if I pull something from the app, I provide a link, and that will open up the app. It's a web app. So the URL will open it up to that page and you can check it out. So I wondered, why would Melanie be in such a rush to go to Rexburg the next day when Alex was in Arizona? Like, I was, that really mystified me. I was like, did she really think that like Chad would murder her kids? Like, that didn't make sense. I mean, I think they all knew that Alex was the family hitman. And then I came across this. For this was significant enough that I actually I looked up the reference and created a video snippet.
Agent, is this in relation to what we were just talking about, other times when the Homer J. Maximus account or a device associated with it shows up at or near Chad Daybell's property? Is this a summary of that?
It is. It just does not include the 2 dates that we just went over. It includes other dates in addition to those.
So what do we see on slide 105?
So this is Google location reporting associated with Alex Cox's Gmail account for device reporting on August 7th between 109 and 120. The locations as indicated on the map, consistent with being at the Chad Daybell property.
And what do we see on slide 106?
The same reporting that I just mentioned associated with the same account, just on August 24th between 7:24 and 7:32 p.m.
Okay.
Slide
Whoops.
107.
Oops, sorry.
Location information associated with the same account that I just mentioned, between on September the 6th between 12:42 and 12:54 p.m.
And slide 108.
the same account associated with Alex Cox, indicating a device reporting on September 25th between 10:05 in the morning and 10:23 in the morning in the vicinity of Chad Daybell's residence.
So, Alex was on Chad Daybell's property on August 7th. So, I think that that is why Melanie was in such a hurry. I don't know why. This was the first I ever heard that Alex was in Rexburg on that day. But he was there for a reason, because he wasn't even on his property that long. I think it was like around 10 minutes. But they got into a big fight because Chad had to leave for this family vacation. So, he couldn't host them and entertain them or negotiate the murder of their kids. But it sure seemed like that is what Melanie and Lori wanted. So that was brand new information to me. So Alex was also there for the house hunting trip. This was also new information to me. So by way of review, now this is the Google data. So it was Alex's Google location data. You'll notice it doesn't have the date that that Tylee and JJ were actually buried on the property. So they probably got that location data from another source. But his location data put him on the property August 7th and also August 24th. So August 24th coincides with the trip that Lori and Melanie took to Rexburg when they were house hunting. So first I found out through the FOIA docs that Lori was there house hunting from August 20th to the 25th. And then later it came out that Melanie was also with her on that trip. And now it came out at Chad's trial that Alex was also there. And so, they were moving the following week. So there had to be a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but there had to be a reason for Alex to be there. Now, it could be something as simple as he had to be there in person to sign the papers on his apartment, because his apartment, I think, went off the market according to Zillow on the 28th. So it might be as simple as that. But I've said this before, I do suspect that there were other plans to murder both Tammy and the kids that didn't come to fruition. Even Alex being taking pictures from that one look over place along the mountain. There was a picture of Chad and Tammy from that same location that had been taken some time before. So, and then he sent the picture to Lori. So, who even knows? But that was new information. I didn't know he was there on the either August trip, because then they moved to Rexburg a week later. So it is not like he just really needed to hang out with Chad. Okay, so there was also something. So I've talked in quite a few lives about how there was evidence that Charles was sending a bunch of text messages to people about text messages and emails about Chad, and trying to kind of raise the alarm that something really sketch was going down. We know, for example, this is just one example. This was in February. You can see up here, this was February 6th. He forwarded an email. It was the ratings email that Chad had sent Lori, and Charles intercepted it and he forwarded it to Colby. We know that he also sent it to Kay. We know he sent it to Adam, and then we found out even Rex, he sent it to Rex. So like he just sent these emails, like just forwarded them en masse, trying to flag this issue of Lori was having an affair with this guy named Chad Daybell, and he even was rating her family members and had rated he said she calls her own daughter a dark, and he puts dark in all caps, spirit, please help her. Well, there was something that Brandon said that confirmed this further. So he talked about how he met with a detective and remembered that Tylee had a green Jeep with Texas license plates, and then he talked about how after the shooting, Brandon had some beliefs about who did it, and he became concerned. He remembered a bunch of emails Charles sent him before he died about the groups Melanie was in, the religious groups. Brandon went back to check the emails. Most came from Chad Daybell. So this is the first reference I have found anywhere where Charles sent multiple emails from Chad to these different family members. I mean, we only know that he sent them to Brandon because Brandon testified to it. But just intuitively, like people were complaining about, how he was sending all of these emails. But then, and I mean, no disrespect to Brandon or any of the other family members, but there has been this thread, like this, this common denominator of friends and family, well, not friends, really just family members saying they didn't know who Chad was. Like Kay had told Detective Moffat she didn't know who the cult leader was. That was in August of 2019. And then later, I think in September, she said she couldn't remember his name. And, there were just all of these, like it just seemed bizarre that so many people were like Colby even said, like Kelsey found out that his mom was married to a man he never heard of. And we know from his interview with Gilbert Police that Lori told him just a few days after Charles was murdered that she planned to get remarried right away. And he said that that made him really angry. And he was like, I can't believe you're going to introduce the kids to a new stepdad. But then he testified at Lori's trial that he just thought she meant like she was getting remarried in a spiritual sense. It wasn't a spiritual sense. Like he wouldn't have brought up the issue of her introducing Tylee and JJ to a new stepfather if she were just talking about marrying in a spiritual sense. But anyway, so this was just something that it was intuitive to me, like just like putting two and two together. It seemed like Charles was forwarding stuff from Chad and trying to raise red flags about Lori's affair with Chad. But this was the first time where I read that I'm aware of where someone actually said there were multiple emails that Charles had sent them that were specifically from Chad Daybell. Okay, so this goes to just what absolutely unsophisticated criminals Lori and Chad were. So there was this reference to well, I'll just read it. Police found a notebook in the Hawaii vehicle. So they had gotten pulled over in Hawaii. If you're not familiar with the story, police pulled them over. They searched the vehicle. They searched Lori and Chad. And they found a notebook in the vehicle and in that notebook, it had pages of email accounts and the passwords. So then police were like, okay, thanks, morons. We're going to get warrants for these accounts. I mean, like, what the heck? Like, they were on the run. Like, they knew they weren't like wanted by law enforcement. Technically, they were only people of interest, but they knew that law enforcement was searching for them, and they had some of their sketch friends alerting them to law enforcement, like getting closer to finding them and stuff. I believe Christopher Perrette was one of them. But anyway, so here they are on the run, and they don't like destroy this notebook or like at least like hide the page somewhere in the room that they were staying in. No, they had the notebook on them with all of these sketch email accounts and passwords. And I just thought of this. I remember the Dateline account sharing on what was then Twitter, was now X, that they had, I believe it was like 60 more than 60 fake email accounts and phone numbers. But like, we didn't hear about all those. So I was like, how did they know about all 60 of them? Well, I think this is how they knew. There was also a detail. I'll have to look for it. They got warrants for 12 of the accounts, but Google came back and said, no, you need to narrow the scope. So they resubmitted the search warrant for 10 of the accounts. And Google was like, oh, that's more like it, and gave them the data on 10 of the accounts. So there we have it. Okay. Also, this was just a funny detail. Melanie Gibb rated one of the investigators who questioned her. So this was someone from the Attorney General's office. So initially, the Attorney General's office, initially, Fremont County Prosecutor's Office had the case. And then they kicked the can down the street to the Attorney General's office because it was just too much. Then when Lindsay Blake was elected, she asked for the case back. So this must have been in the window where the Attorney General's office was investigating. And I'll play this.
At some point, the interview ended, is that correct?
Correct.
And then at some point, there was a further discussion that was off the tape, correct?
Correct.
And in all respect to you, officer, you contacted me and told me about that openly, did you not?
I did.
You discussed with me that upon review and being received a subpoena from my office, you discovered that there was a portion of that interview that was not properly recorded, correct?
Correct.
You didn't anticipate that Ms. Gibb would continue to talk to you after the recording was pushed off, did you?
Correct.
Okay, and what was the topic of that discussion?
After the interview was done, it was more because I was curious. Her talking about the scale of light and dark discussion. I believe she mentioned that I was nice, that I was a good person. And so I just asked the question, what did she believe on the scale? Where would she rate me?
And did she respond to you?
She did.
What did she say?
She stated that I was on the light side, that I was so light that I was given this light aura.
And was that something that she made it? She didn't tell you that was Chad Daybell told her how to do that, did she?
No, she did not.
Just a second. Okay, so this was funny to me, but there's also a serious point to it. Both Melanie and Zulema have falsely claimed that ratings came from Chad. So I think they were trying to help Lori out for a while. And I think they were also both afraid of how Lori could retaliate against them because of their complicity. So I think they were walking a pretty fine line of where they didn't want to be prosecuted themselves. But they also, don't want to share too much or something that could then anger Lori, resulting in clapback from her. So, so both Melanie and Zulema have claimed that Chad was the one who raided people. Then he would tell Lori, and then Lori would disseminate this information to the masses. And, supposedly there was also a pendulum and, all this stuff. Just ridiculousness. And I've talked before about how we know that Lori raided people because she had an entire document that was even longer than Chad's rating document, where she rated a whole bunch of people, including like modern day LDS leaders and stuff. So she gave them light and dark ratings. She also said like who people had been married to in previous probations, who their kids were. And that's when we found out that like Melanie Boudreau was one of her kids. Christina was one of her kids. Serena was one of her kids. And so, and Chad was Methuselah. And in that probation, he was actually Lori's father, which that, I've talked about that before. I think that detail is very alarming because all of these stupid stories, in my opinion, were fantasies. And anyway, so whatever. But they have postulated that Chad was the one driving the bus. He was the one doing all these things. Lori just disseminated it. Well, we also know that Zulema raided people because she raided her, I believe it was her son-in-law, said he was a dark spirit. And I think she thought like that Chad and Lori would do something with this information, which they weren't. It appears that Melanie Gibb raided her ex-husband, and because there was a reference in the FOIA docs that sure looked like she was telling him that he was a dark spirit. Plus, I know from a confidential source that he had said something to her, something to the effect of, could I also have been one of these victims? And Melanie said maybe. So take that for what it's worth. But then here we have Melanie actually raiding someone who was questioning her about this case. So, okay.
At some point, the interview ended.
I hate that it does that. Okay, this was a sad detail. So it said here, Wood asked Stubbs about a flash drive he found. On the drive were several photos of Chad and Lori's wedding from November 5th, 2019. Stubbs used forensic software to search the flash drive, so the original content was not disturbed. Stubbs found that photos of Chad, Tammy, their kids, Chad and Tammy's courtship to their marriage, and also I think this was supposed to be also pictures of their kids being born. Basically, a family album had all been deleted. So trying to picture this, Chad finds his jump drive and he's like, I'm going to repurpose this jump drive to use it for pictures from our wedding. And he basically wipes out his entire family history, the pictures from their wedding, from, you know, their kids, even their courtship, their kids being born. I mean, that I just thought was a really, really sad detail. And it also, in my opinion, speaks to just how extremely selfish Chad was. It was like, no, he needed this jump drive. And it appeared that he really had no concern about if like his kids and grandkids and great grandkids would one day want these pictures. So, okay. Oh, another detail that was new to me is it appears that Chad was the one who was first obsessed with malachite. So he was, it was Heidemann. I think this was a female. Anyway, I'll say she, but it may have been a male witness. But oh, no, it was a female. Okay. Heidemann says she could not tell if Chad's intent was to write a book. Pryor asked about Chad searching for malachite in March 2018. He didn't know Lori Vallow at that time, which is true. So why was Chad searching for malachite in March 2018? I've talked about this before, but it just seemed like, oops, this group, it's like they were just building stone soup. Like people contributed to these different beliefs. Like I did a live way back in the day. I think this was in 2020 from my Analytics account, where Jason Mao was part of this whole dark movie about zombies. And so I wondered if he was the one who introduced the concept of, you know, dark spirits actually being zombies. Who knows? But okay. But I would have suspected that the malachite detail came from Lori, but it appears that Chad came up with that one. Okay, this was so weird. So Ian was testifying, and I'll just read it. Chad says they will see each other again, even though they are going to different corners of the world. Chad promises, quote, all of us a home in the New Jerusalem as we work under the direction of the Savior. Chad says they will have wonderful reunions, and it will be a glorious place where vibrations radiate constantly. So, I mean, on a more serious note, they thought that vibrations had to do with, it was like energy work, and like the more, I think going to the temple increased your vibrations. And then I think when you hit like a vibration level of 1,000, that's when you could start teleporting through these portals and stuff. But anyway, but yeah, so that I thought, okay, I need to verify this, and I did look it up. But yeah, he did actually say a glorious place where vibrations radiate constantly. Okay, this was, it shouldn't have been that surprising, but it still was surprising just how much they were in constant communication when Lori was in jail, but Chad was still free. So it says Rob Wood is questioning Hermosillo. That was Lieutenant Hermosillo. He asked when Lori Vallow was arrested, February 20th, 2020. She ended up in the Madison County Jail. Wood asked about the phone system the jail has for inmates to use to talk with others. It's called Telmate. Hermosillo listened to phone calls between Chad and Lori. Quote, every day we listened to multiple phone calls between Chad and Lori. We were trying to get any information on the whereabouts of JJ and Tylee at that time. Chad and Lori spoke with each other 10 to 12 times a day. Okay, so these were my discoveries for this week. And these were just the ones that I had time to actually pull together and include in the presentation. There are more, and that's why I suspect there will be enough content, most likely, to hold us over until Brandon's trial, and then I will cover Brandon's trial. If you want to access the presentation, you can go to bit.ly/app May 16th. All right. Whoop. Okay, and now I will open it up to questions. If you have a question, I play with my hair a lot, but if you have a question, please just put the word question in all caps or use the question mark emoji. That just helps it stand out. And one of the moderators, Anna, she's absolutely fantastic at scouring the chat for questions, and then she drops them into another chat for me, and that just kind of helps things move along. Okay. Let's see if there are any questions. Okay. Whoops. I think I may have answered this one during the live, but Marissa asked, do you think Lori truly believed JJ and Tylee were dark spirits? So no, I don't. I do not think that any of them believed any of this nonsense, with the exception of Alex. I think Alex was slow enough that I think that there are some indications that he actually believed this stuff. Like, one of the things that I found was that Alex spent thousands of dollars on, I forget how many guns. I don't know if Janice is here and remembers, but I think it was like 20 guns or something. And I believe this was after they moved to Idaho. So he took out a loan specifically. He said it was for medical expenses, but it was specifically just to gather up all of these guns. And so obviously he didn't need, a room full of guns to murder the victims, who I believe he played a role in murdering. But so then what were they for? And so I just wonder if he actually really believed that he was going to be this warrior. If all these talks about dreams, and you see even in David Warwick's dreams, and he really was, for the most part, on the periphery of this smaller group. I mean, just to be fair, like, I think some people group all of Preparing a People and AVOW into being Chad Daybell followers. I actually do not believe that. I went through the communications on AVOW that the someone from the FBI had infiltrated the group and grabbed a bunch of screenshots. So well, downloaded it. They weren't screenshots. But anyway, but I read through those, and there were quite a few people who, they were of sound mind. They were questioning, why is Chad on the run? Even Christopher Perrett, who leads the group, initially was like, why is he on the run? And why is he with this woman so soon after his wedding? Until Chad contacted him, and then he became the main source. And I think he was salty because Hector Sosa, I think his last name was, he was the spokesperson for Chad. And I think that hurt Christopher Perrett's feelings. So then Chad reaches out to Christopher Perrett, and then Christopher Perrett did a 180 and supported Chad and was like, hey, like passing on messages from Chad. So, but the vast majority of people who were commenting were like, what is going on? This is bizarre. Why is he with this woman? Et cetera, et cetera. So, anyway, so even with David's beliefs, I think he was pretty much on the periphery of this group. Like he testified that he met Lori for the first time when he and Chad traveled to Arizona the first weekend in August. So that was like August 3rd, August 4th, somewhere in there. That was when like their whole group had this massive casting. And this was at Lori's house where Charles had just been murdered weeks before. So I'm not making light of his involvement. I think the fact that, like he had this sketch dream and and then supposedly was like so worried and said in an interview in Dateline that he demanded to see Lori, but Lori didn't tell him that he was at school. She told him that Alex had come and had taken JJ away because he was being a zombie, and so the fact that David Warwick, Melanie Gibb, neither of them called police. They didn't call in a welfare check. They just went back to their homes and whatever. He's still, I think he carries a lot of complicity. All I'm saying is that he wasn't central to this group. So I think this whole idea of people having these kind of wild end time dreams, because by the nature of people being drawn to these end time groups, like these prepper groups and stuff. And this was like a prepper group with a twist of lime, like a very, very spiritual, focus. I think they just naturally kind of had a gravitational pull toward that. But yeah, so I do wonder if Alex actually bought into everything. But the rest of them, nope. I don't think that she actually thought her kids were zombies or dark spirits. I think she just didn't want to be a mom anymore. And she found someone who not only quantified her grudges, even going so far as, to say that Chad, what did he say? Oh, I forget. I lost my train of thought. My daughter just came home. Anyway, but yeah, anyway. So I think he was the only one who believed it. I think Lori just wanted her kids gone. Okay. Why didn't Kay tell police about Chad? I don't know. It's really, it's just such a mystifying detail for me. Excuse me. Yeah, so I don't know. It was after Tammy died, she sent an email, and I've shared this before, it's also in the timeline, but it just starts off Chad Daybell, cult leader, and then she just like spilled everything. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I have my theories, but I only shared those theories with a very small group of people. Okay. Any idea how Melanice has managed to stay out of court for this round? Well, I think the prosecutor, any prosecutor is going to see her as a very unreliable witness. So I think that's why she wasn't called. Yeah, I think that's why she and Summer and Janice weren't called as witnesses in Chad's trial. But I don't see how she's going to be able to escape it in Brandon's trial. The only way would be if she like just begged Lori not to subpoena her as a witness, which I can imagine her doing. But that's going to be really hard to like have a trial about the attempted murder of Brandon, and his ex-wife not testify. Stranger things have happened. But if she's not subpoenaed by the defense, I think it's just because I think it's just because they had mercy on her. But okay. Well, what I can't understand is how she isn't in jail awaiting trial with Lori. Because another detail, and I'll cover this in another live, is I think Chad had said this. I think it was in one of the recordings that Ian did. But she was worried about Rexburg police having her hard drive. So I found out that Rexburg police had her hard drive. We may have actually read that in the FOIA docs. That might have been in the FOIA docs. But then also we know that they didn't get an extraction of her phone when she was questioned by Gilbert police, which is just so strange to me because she was so clearly being deceptive. Like, she was interviewed the day after the attempt on Brandon's life. And I forget who interviewed her, maybe Detective Pillar, but the questions were very simple. Where did you go yesterday? Who did you talk to? She couldn't answer those questions. She was like, well, sometimes we go to the mall, sometimes to the park. Well, that's not what he asked. He didn't ask what you sometimes do, what you regularly do with your toddler daughter. He asked, where were you and who did you talk to? She couldn't remember who she talked to. And I think she more generally said the only people she really talks to are her Aunt Lori and her grandmother Janice. And which I think was quite telling about Janice's position in all of this. Like, anyway, but yeah, but they didn't get a dump of her phone at that time because I'm pretty sure I read that it was when she was interviewed in Idaho. They did an extraction of her phone. So law enforcement has the extraction of her phone. We know that in October, they had already pulled like all of their phone log data. So like their iCloud and, the data that their cell providers could provide, which is different from extraction data because extraction data is the information that is actually stored locally, on your device. So like when you email someone, when you text someone, all of that is stored locally on your device. And anyway, so they have all of this data plus her hard drive. Plus, we know she was worried about Rexburg police having her hard drive. And we also know from the Gilbert police report, I've talked about this in other lives, but in the police report, it actually verified. So backing up a little bit, I had a confidential source who had told me that Melanie was in Rexburg from, I believe it was like September 20, I don't know. It was the end of September. I think she went, I think it was like maybe 5 days, the end of September. And that was actually verified in the Gilbert police report. And then the very next sentence, it said that during the, time of, I think it was like September 26th to October 1st, something like that. So add one day before Melanie getting to Rexburg and one day after she left, it said that during that time, of which Melanie's visit completely overlapped, during that time, Lori, Alex, and Chad were planning the murder of Brandon Boudreaux. That was in the very next sentence, So we have that, they have her GPS data. I mean, they have all of this information. And plus, we also found out, I mentioned this in the live last week, or 2 weeks ago, I think, and this was also new to me, that they had Venmo transfers, that there were multiple Venmo transfers between, I believe it was Lori, Melanie Boudreaux, and Alex. And there were also text messages about cash exchanges. So they have all of this evidence, and they didn't bring charges against Melanie. I refuse to believe, I absolutely do not believe that they couldn't have made at least a circumstantial case against Melanie. In fact, I think it would actually strengthen the case against Lori. I think, I'm glad that they're trying Lori, but it's just stranger than fiction. But anyway, okay. All right. I'm not really sure what this means. And the removal of all these victims financially funded Lori and Chad's lifestyles. What do you think, Annie? I'm not sure what you mean by the removal. Oh, okay. The removal of these victims, so the murder of these victims, funded Chad and Lori's lifestyles. Yeah, absolutely. They didn't profit much from the murder of the kids. Like Lori, had the Social Security. It appears that, well, let me back up. So remember Melanie, then Boudreaux, now Pulaski, texted Lori encouraging her to get life insurance plans against the kids. And then I discovered through going through the doc, and this was when I was still building the doc, when I was in the at the trial, I was just you have to stress test these apps to see what causes them to fail. So I was searching for all these things that I was already curious about. Excuse me. And one of the details that came up was that Lori actually searched for life insurance for the kids, and she searched for a very specific policy, but Tylee was too old to be able to get a policy on her, and it appears she didn't get the policy on JJ. I think there was also a waiting period, when you buy the policy, there was a waiting period before, if the person died the next day, there wouldn't be a payout. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I think that's why she didn't get the policy on JJ either. But yeah, she's still clearly profited. But I think more importantly, I think she knew that if she had these two kids, one who I have no problem believing that Tylee didn't like Chad, but also we found out that Chad visited Arizona. Again, I found this out when I was building the app. It was a week and a half after Charles was killed. And I am sure Tylee knew that her mom was having an affair. So, here her dad died a year before. Now Charles is dead, and, she's having this affair. There's no question in my mind that she did not like Chad, and she didn't have much of a poker face. But I think Lori had to know on some level that with having a teenager who strongly disliked Chad and a 7-year-old uh, little boy with ADHD, hyperactivity, and autism, Chad wasn't going to stick around because she wasn't going to be this sex goddess that he thought she was going to be. Do you think Lori has Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis to just find out what they are saying about her? I'm not sure. I'm not sure like the time reference on that. I'm not sure what this is referencing. Like what who was saying about her. Tangentially related, I thought it was interesting during the Arizona trial. She was asking these former friends, like, when they last saw or talked to other friends. And that was so weird. I mean, it had nothing to do with anything. And I think she was just trying to find out, like, who was still friends with whom and what they were up to, which is weird. But, yeah, so AZ Mermaid, if you want to clarify, I'd love to answer your question. Okay, Leah asks, hey, Leah, do you think Lori ever wishes she could go back to her old cushy life with Charles? I think every day. Yeah, I do. She had, it wasn't like a life without struggle. I mean, obviously, they had financial struggles. They were living beyond their means. Lori even told me when I was there in 2018 that, you know, it looked like they had all this money because they had this big house, but that they had this pattern of they'd get behind on bills and then Charles would get a big payout, like a commission check, and then they'd catch up on everything, and it was kind of rinse and repeat. And we did hear in, I believe it was the Arizona trial, like there was a fairly significant payout, and that just happened to be right before Lori moved back in with him and had told Melanie Gibb, according to Melanie, that she moved in with him to get his financial affairs in order. But yeah, so but that's what she told me. So, but having said that, it was still a very comfortable life. And you know, I mean, I've never been in jail or prison or anything like that, so I can't identify with a complete loss of all of your freedoms. And also, you know, all these people who were hanging on when they thought, you know, she was going to be a source of wealth and, you know, all these things, like everyone has just kind of abandoned her. And I've shared before that I know from one confidential source that at least during that time, so I don't remember when this source had shared this, and this was secondhand, but I don't remember exactly when this was, but the person had said the only person who was in contact with Lori was her mom, like her family and stuff. So, and that she ate total junk. But anyway, so yeah, I just think like the isolation has to be extremely difficult. She even talked about how like life in I think this was in her interview with Brianna. She talked about how like prison was, I think she said, like 1,000 times better than jail, especially the Maricopa County jail. So, you know, I all I can relate it to was like one time I had a concussion and the doctor said, you need to go into a dark room for a week and not like be on any devices, not listen to anything, not watch anything, you know, close the curtains. And after a week, and she even said preferably 2 weeks if you can, swing it. I couldn't. After a week, I was going absolutely bonkers. And that was only a week, and now she's been incarcerated for more than 5 years. So I know that some people think that like that she actually believes all of these weird beliefs and is going to hang tough till the end. I don't think that she ever believed these weird beliefs. I think she does have delusions of grandeur. Like, I think she's always kind of thought that she was, like the most special snowflake. Uh, but I don't think that she actually thought she was a goddess and, all of that nonsense, or that they portaled. Because also when she and Chad had their fight, she made fun of it. And I'm like, there you go. If you actually believed it, even when you were mad at him, you wouldn't have made fun of it. But anyway, so yeah, I do. I think she would go back in a heartbeat. Okay, someone asked, did you see Lori in court this week? I really don't follow the hearings, especially now after being back from the trial. Like, I am focused on business and catching up in my life. Just had my graduation with my daughter last week. So no, I didn't. My in our moderator chat, like, people will drop clips, and I saw clips of her just being outrageously arrogant, accusatory to the judge. Yeah. So, yeah. Having said that, when it comes to grounds for like the issue with the juror who talked about knowing before they started deliberations that she already had 3 life sentences, I do think that will come up on appeal. It doesn't mean it's going to be an automatic appeal, but I think that they already have pretty solid grounds for appeal on multiple points. But from what I found, like, just, asking ChatGPT and Claude about it, like, who would make the decision of a mistrial? According to what I read, it would be the judge who presided over the case, so Judge Boreski. So I didn't think that there would be any way that Judge Boreski would say, sure, yeah, let's declare a mistrial. So, but I think it will most likely come back up on appeal. So, and I think Rachel Smith said well, she said that the juror issue will most likely come up as a basis for appeal. Again, it doesn't mean the appeal will be granted. And she had a really balanced perspective as a defense attorney. But I think what makes this juror situation a little different is that there were multiple incidents with this juror and he wasn't dismissed. So I think that makes it a little different from other cases. And I read in one case, I forget what it was now, it was an Arizona case where a juror looked something up and a mistrial was declared. But anyway, okay. Do you think Charles was aware of Lori's plans to kill Joe before the fact? If so, did he actively help, try to dissuade, or just do nothing? I can't help wondering. I think that there's a good chance we may never know. So I do suspect that, I've talked about this before, that he did know that Joe was killed. But because when he was interviewed by Gilbert Police, he said that Lori, when she threatened him, she said, I'm going to kill you too. But then he like abandoned that point. And the patrol officers, in taking his statement didn't catch it or weren't inquisitive about that. But so I think that that's a pretty strong indicator that, I think if she had made that threat and he had no idea that Joe had been murdered, yeah, I think like he would have led with that. Like, she's dangerous. She actually told me that she killed her third husband. So, but beyond that, we may never know, because typically when these FOIA docs are released, they redact that information. Sometimes though, like there are details that I've read in a FOIA doc that I kind of tuck it away, but when I learn a new detail, I'm like, wait a minute. Whoa, hold about, and I've talked about how, like, even the detail of, like, was Summer Shiflett in Rexburg, Idaho, after the kids were killed, like in late October. And there was just, it was a legend that had all these initials like BB, CD, LV, MB. So like all of them had pretty clear initials: Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, Melanie Boudreau, Brandon Boudreau, and then there is an SS, and that there was a yellow pin that was on Alex's apartment. So yeah, so that's always going to be a question. But I'm sure when they were redacting documents, they probably weren't like, is some freak potentially going to take this this legend and juxtapose it with a map that is referenced later in this report, so. But I suspect they'll be much more careful in future FOIA docs. Hi, Penny. I thought there is some evidence that Joe was killed with malachite. There's no evidence of that. I do suspect he was killed. But I've talked in many lives about the weird details from the welfare check the day that they found his body. But yeah, there's nothing that indicates malachite. Okay, AZ Mermaid took a second pass. Do you think Lori has Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis on her witness list to just find out what they're saying about her? I have they released the witness list for Brandon's trial? Maybe if one of my mods could text me if they know the answer to that. I don't know that. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it would definitely, it would be risky to call them as witnesses, because obviously at this point, no one wants to be a witness for Lori. But who knows? Okay. Do you know if Chad Daybell has filed for divorce from Lori? I heard he has a picture of Tammy on his cell wall. I think Emma said that. So I shared that from a confidential source. I don't know if that's true. To my knowledge, Emma hasn't commented about that. But no, I haven't heard anything about him filing for divorce. Did Adam move in with Janice and Barry, maybe to help with the bills they never had to pay when Charles? So I don't know. I know that when he was living in Kansas, I think this was right around the time the kids were found He took a trip to St. George, which is where his parents were living at the time, and posted pictures on social media. And then he moved there. I don't think it's ever been disclosed if he actually lived with Barry and Janice at that time. Lori's MO with Joe, Charles, Tylee, and JJ was isolate, disparage, murder, collect cash. Do you think her bringing Melanie's to Rexburg was a first step in that pattern, if no welfare check? So I think Melanie went to Idaho because she was on the run. Like, I think she thought it was just a matter of time that police were going to knock on her door and arrest her in the attempted murder of, her then estranged husband. So I think she moved to Idaho to get away from that. But yeah, there are so many strange details in that, because then she moves to Idaho and almost immediately, like within a couple days, Lori and Chad leave for their honeymoon, and then they get back and they find out from Alex that there was a search warrant for the Jeep and the Jeep was gone, but they didn't take off. Like, I just find that such a strange detail. And I do wonder if it was because they were worried about Melanie. Because originally, like, they were looking at places to rent in Hawaii. And Chad had reportedly told one friend that they were moving, he was getting married and they were moving to Hawaii. So I think that's what Lori and Chad wanted to do. It's mystifying to me that they stayed in Rexburg, especially after the Jeep was taken by Rexburg police. So, like, they were basically just kind of sitting ducks. So I shared this in a more recent live, that Melanie actually asked, this was Melanie Boudreau, actually asked Lori in a text message if there was any chance of a second attempt on Brandon's life. I don't remember the exact wording, but it was a little vague, but clearly, is there any chance of there being a second try? And Lori said yes, there was a chance. So I do suspect that Lori was going to get almost like a finder's fee, that both she and Alex were going to profit from the murder of Brandon. Because I found out, again, by doing searches on the app, Brandon only had a $200,000 life insurance policy. Somehow this rumor was started that he also had $1 million policy. He didn't. It was $200,000. Where she was going to make most of the money would have been in the sale of their home and their business. So Brandon bought out her shares of the business they had together with their business partner. But that's where she was making most of her money, not the life insurance. I mean, 200,000, that's still, a pretty good chunk, but not worth murdering for. But when you add that to, the money she would have made selling the business, in addition to their selling their home, she stood to profit quite a bit. And those are only the assets we knew about. There was also, the Tesla he was driving, and who knows what other assets they had. So I suspect both Lori and Alex were going to get a cut. And that's why you don't see, at least not to date, I haven't ever seen evidence of Melanie contacting Alex directly. She asked Lori if there was any chance. So And yeah, so, and I already talked about like the strange detail about how when she and Lori went to Hawaii with what they were, I suspect they were planning on taking Melanie's kids because Melanie tried to pick them up from school early the day before, but Brandon didn't send them to school. And and then we found out that Alex was supposed to be on that trip, but then was the trip was canceled for him, and it was decided that it would be better for him to help Chad with something in Idaho, which obviously was the murder of Tammy. But I suspect the plan was for him to murder Melanie's two middle kids and then go back and help with Tammy's murder. Because otherwise, why would they have Alex joining them on a trip to Hawaii? Certainly not as a reward. He botched the murder of Brandon, obviously, thankfully. And actually, he didn't even really botch it. There was a detail in the FOIA docs that it was the coding on the window of Brandon's Tesla that caused the bullet to divert enough to miss his head by inches. But in all of his like Google searches, trying to calculate, he didn't account for Tesla's apparently having a pretty stellar coating on the window that is strong enough to divert bullets. Okay. All right. Have you had any law enforcement or attorneys reaching out to you for help after the app came out? You've done some badass work. Thank you, Sarita. No one from this case is going to reach out to me, but is theirs, but for the taking. So, that said, and I talked about this already, but like an app like this with unredacted documents, clearly that's not going to happen in this case because of conflict of interest. But in other cases, imagine like the oh gosh, what is her name? The woman who's being tried in Massachusetts, Karen Reed. Imagine with the Karen Reed case, that's also like a really complicated case with a lot of moving parts. Imagine having an app like this with the full force of all of their, their police documents, their evidence, any device data they have. I mean, it would be incredibly powerful. Plus, then you also throw in like generative AI. It's such a game changer. Okay. Regarding Melanie and Zulema on her witness list, she did, but Judge Boreski found that they have no relevant information and he will only mention their names in jury selection, so she won't get them on stand. Oh, okay. I don't know if she just didn't present that information. Yeah, I'll have to watch that hearing. If someone has a link to that hearing so I could just watch that, I'd be curious to see what evidence she presented. Because Judge Boreski explained to her that she can't just call witnesses. Like, there has to be something of evidentiary value, to their testimony. And he's the gatekeeper. So the judge is the gatekeeper to determine if a witness has information that is of value. And so, she got like all spicy about it, and because she didn't understand that protocol and was like, well, I'm not going to give away my defense strategy. And I was like, dude, you have no defense strategy. Like, there was no strategy that I saw anywhere in in that trial, unless her strategy was just to not do much of anything because the prosecution didn't turn over the extraction data and pushed Detective Coons through as an expert witness. But okay, he asked her in detail what the relevant information they had would be, and she went off as to stuff. So he just ended saying they are not relevant. So, I mean, I think, if she would have had a real defense attorney, I think they could have made a compelling case that they had information that was of evidentiary value. So does this mean she's not calling Melanie, her niece? If someone knows the answer to that, I didn't know that we already know her witness list. And also, is she calling any witnesses, or is this going to be like the last trial where they're basically calling the Von Trapp family? Yes, she's not calling anyone. Amazing. Well, couldn't have happened to a better person. So, okay, well, I think that's all the questions for tonight. And so we'll do this again in a couple weeks. Have a great night and weekend.